morning, good evening, good afternoon. I've been listening to a video clip, an interview that Tendai Biti had with Robert Mugabe. If you can find the full video, it's worth listening to. But I'll just play you a short clip of that video.
The reason why the Pentecostal Prosperity Church is mushrooming is because it's harvesting that fatalism, that fatalism that there's nothing that I can do. So our people are disadvantaged, and the state now harvests that fatalism. It takes advantage of that, because when they come with inputs, my Israel thinks it's coming from the government. It's coming from the
government
party,
is a savior,
and the party is my savior. The party is my savior. There is no cause and connection between the condition of that citizen, his suffering, and the lack of delivery by the state, the lack of leadership by the state, the lack of empathy by the state. So when the state comes with its little handouts, it is the savior. But the savior is the creator of the chaos. This is different from urban communities, because in urban communities, most people understand causality. Most people understand cause and impact.
Yeah.
So they will know that, but this is Zanu PF that has created this. So they can come and give me a packet of
Matemba
sugar
and
beans
yeah.
or Matemba.
Yeah.
They created my
But where
my
is this?
chaos. I've been in situations where, Trevor, I hide my little green passport, not because I'm embarrassed to be a Zimbabwean. I am not. But I'm embarrassed to start conversations about Zimbabwe by a person who says, "Oh, Zimbabwe, how is it? I don't like those conversations. But
They take you.
Mnangagwa might be the president of the country, but he's a weak man. He's a weak man. He's an absolutely weak man, objectively and subjectively. The economy is in this mess because he's a weak man. He has failed to change it. 4 million Zimbabweans are in the diaspora because we've got weak men who have been running us since 1980. Massive levels of unlawful abortions. In every hour in Zimbabwe, 6 illegal abortions are taking place as we are talking. And
Yeah.
these are official statistics. There's massive drug abuse. Motoriro, Guka, Crystal Meth. There's a little bottle of alcohol called Kambra, which costs $1 and so forth. Any serious government would ban
Be
that
banning
stuff.
that.
But this government benefits from that. So when you look at the maternal mortality rates, when you look at infant mortality rates, there is slow genocide that is taking place in our country as a result of an irresponsible government that has abandoned its obligations towards its citizen. And the statistics speak for themselves. Not to
And
mention
people are leaving the
the
country.
millions of people that are leaving the country, over 4 million people that have left the country. 73% of our top professionals, top surgeons, top engineers, top scientists, they've left the country. Some of them are in a very unkind, unwelcoming diaspora where they are forced to do menial jobs that they never imagined that after spending 24 years at a university, you will find yourself cleaning an old person in Lancaster. So it's a demeaning, but that's the status quo.
But it's
What he's saying, of course, is very true. Zimbabwe is a failed state. I've said it on this platform. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. And it's still very true. But what we need to look at here is, why are we a failed state? As much as no one can deny that Zanu PF and its weak leaders, and there is absolutely right, Tambudzo Mnangagwa is a weak leader, a buffoon. The question one has got to ask is, why is it that after 45 years of independence, the country is still being ruled by buffoons? And this comes to the opposition now. Because since the late 1990s, the nation realized that as long as Zanu PF is able to rig elections, we will never remove them from office. And this is why the nation came with the conclusion that we need to elect an opposition members who will implement the democratic reforms necessary to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Necessary to break this cycle of rigged elections, which is at the heart of the country's problems. Tendai Biti, Morgan Trangirai, and all the other MDC leaders, when they launched their party in 1999, they were answering to that call. And they even called their party the Movement for Democratic Change, to underline that their main purpose was to implement democratic reforms to end the cycle of rigged elections. Now we come to the nitty-gritties. MDC, CCC leaders have been in power for the last 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU of 2008 to 2013. And yet, as we know, from 23 elections, Zanu PF continues to blatantly rig elections. Why? Answer: because MDC leaders have failed to implement even one token reform. Not even one token reform. This is at the heart of our problem. In 2013, Tendai Biti himself admitted that we have a problem of rigged elections. And most significantly, we cannot keep on participating in rigged elections. He even admitted that Mugabe has perfected the art of rigging elections. The full quotation I'm showing you at the bottom of the screen there. When he tried to convince his fellow opposition leaders that they must stop participating in flawed elections, there were no takers. His opposition leaders, friends, were now keen to participate in flawed elections in the hope that they will be the lucky ones to win the few gravitating seats that Zanu PF was offering. MDC leaders failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU because Robert Mugabe bribed them with the tokens of high office. The E-Class Mercedes-Benz for ministers and deputy ministers, and Tendai Biti was the Minister of Finance during the GNU, and the Prime Minister himself and his two deputy prime ministers. The generous salaries and allowances. And for Morgan Tsvangirai, the $4 million mansion in Highlands. The MDC leaders forgot about the reforms. This is the reality that Tendai Biti and many of his MDC CCC leaders have been very careful to avoid. You cannot get them to give you a straightforward answer on that issue. Why did you fail to implement even one token reform? They will not want to answer that. In this interview with Trevor, Tendai Biti is right that Zanu PF has made particularly the rural poor, poor, and kept them in poverty so that the party can go to them now and give them the handouts, the fertilizer, the 5 kgs of maize meal, 2 liters of cooking oil, those hampers, so that the people can feel grateful to the party as their savior, not knowing that it is the same party that is keeping them in poverty. Tendai Biti is absolutely right on that one. He's spot on. This is very true. This is the reality of Zimbabwe. Here is Margaret Longo speaking of the same problem.
They have wrong priorities, especially the current government. How can you go and build an airport which services a few people, and the majority are the elite and the so-called investors? Look at the rural. I made you come to interview me because I wanted you to have the experience of the roads that we are using. If we go today to our hospital there, you feel pity with that's a hospital in a rural area. If we go to our clinic, you feel pity. We have no piped water here. Do you know the reason why the rural people vote for Zanu PF? 1, they're intimidated. 2, the policy is that the rural people should remain poor and subservient to the government. They should remain poor, because if they remain poor, they continue singing the song for their master. This is why these people have been impoverished. It's for a reason. Because at the moment, if you economic empower these people, they'll go out of hand. Zanu PF will never have control over them.
Yes, Margaret Longo is spot on that one. She's only restating the same thing that Tendai Biti said himself. But let's go to the urban voters. Tendai Biti is right. Zanu PF does not have the same stranglehold on the urban voters as it has on the rural voters. Here is the domain of the opposition. These are the people who understood that the country needed democratic reforms. These are the people who have been repeating chinja, chinja for the last 25 years. The tragedy, however, is that most of these people, learned as many of them are, indeed, I think the majority of the urban voters and the diaspora support, which is again another stronghold of the opposition, most of those people have at least O-level qualifications. They've got 11 years of formal education. And yet, the majority of them don't even know what the democratic reforms, the democratic changes they've been calling for are, much less understand that the primary purpose of the 2008 to 2013 GNU was to implement the democratic reforms. Of course, if you don't understand that that was the primary purpose, it's no surprising that when Tendai Biti and company sold out on the reforms, those people have never blamed the opposition. How can you blame them for something that you don't know yourself? And so when Tendai Biti realized that he and his friends could take advantage of the urban voters, just as Zanu PF was taking advantage of the rural voters, they did just that. Tendai Biti and company have never come out to the people and told them that they failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU. And to compound their betrayal, they've changed tune. Ever since the GNU debacle, they have given the impression that they could win rigged elections. In other words, there was no need to implement any democratic reforms anymore because they have devised ways of winning rigged elections. In 2018, Chamisa came out and told the people that MDC alliance has stringent measures to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. And the majority of their urban followers believed it. And so they participated in those elections, convinced that MDC alliance would win them. And the day after the voting was done, Chamisa was out again claiming that Zanu PF had rigged the elections. It is worth noting here that very few, if any at all, of their urban supporters and their diaspora supporters ever took Chamisa, Tendai Biti, or any of the leaders of MDC CCC to task on why did you say you had stringent measures to stop the rigging of the elections, when the following day after the election, you admit that the elections were rigged. They never did. And to make things worse, come 2023, they were back with the same lies. Chamisa was telling the people that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, CCC was going to win big. Yet the country did not even have something as basic as a verified voters roll. And Tim Pachedu had done an excellent job showing that the voters roll was in shambles. Chamisa and company were determined to participate in the flawed elections out of greed. The same reason why they had failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU. SADC and the AU election observers condemned 2023 elections. And yet, MDC leaders went ahead and still took up their gravity seats, even when they knew SADC and the AU had condemned the process. Here is Margaret Dongo speaking to that issue of MDC leaders taking up their gravity seats.
Because they have a look. You asked me a very good question. You were in the Central Committee. You were a member of Parliament. You were this and that. Why are you feeling the pinch? It's because, I didn't believe in corruption. I'm not a selfish person. I'm a selfless person. And I'm like a social worker. Politics is not a business. This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to Parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in Parliament. This is why we have violence in this country. Because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the CCC party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system. And we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament. Because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to roll alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
Caring or not caring, the public would have forced them because the majority of the people would want representation in Parliament.
But they went anyway?
But they went. They realized that, you heard them complain, I used my own money to be in Parliament. But what about me who have voted for you? I used my own money. So the idea is to recover. Is it a business where you want to recover your losses? Is it a business? Politics, is it a business where everyone else, when you get in Parliament, you want to recover your losses? A good example is now, parliamentarians have been elected. I don't know when we last saw our member of Parliament in this area.
Well, she has got a point. Zimbabwe had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have ended the Zanu PF dictatorship. That is a fundamental political reality that many Zimbabweans have failed to appreciate. much more so those in the urban centers. They are the ones who have kept participating in flawed elections, even when they've been told the process is flawed. And if you participate, you only give Zanu PF legitimacy. They've been easily conned by Tendai Biti and company to participate, because Tendai Biti and these fellow opposition leaders stood to gain a few gravy train seats, particularly those in the urban centers. The urban voters are the ones, in their ignorance, who have let down the country. The rural voters, they are intimidated. If you are in the rural area and they have these Zanu PF thugs turn up at your homestead, you can't send them away. The level of political intimidation in the rural areas is such that you'll have to be really brave to stand up to these thugs. In the urban centers, it's a different scenario. Why the urban voters have failed to understand what the democratic reforms are about, and more significantly, that the opposition have sold out. Even now, with the benefit of hindsight, 25 years after the opposition MDC were elected for the primary purpose of delivering the democratic changes, they failed to implement even one token reform. Why the urban voters have remained ignorant of that basic political fact beggars belief. SADC and the AU condemned 2023 elections. And they would have gone one step further and denied Zanu PF political legitimacy if the opposition and their supporters had not participated in those flawed elections in their millions. And if opposition leaders had not taken up their seats, even after SADC had condemned the process. If the urban and the diaspora stop supporting the opposition blindly and insist on democratic reforms, SADC and the AU will deny Zanu PF political legitimacy, as they did in 2008. And thus giving Zimbabwe a second bite at the cherry to stop this culture of rigged elections and bad governance. Why this has become so difficult, so incomprehensible, beggars belief. We need free, fair, and credible elections. Zanu PF will never implement any reforms as long as Zanu PF is confident that the opposition will participate in flawed elections in their millions. Can't blame Zanu PF for that. Why would they want to implement reforms when there is no pressure for them to do so? The 2023 elections were condemned by both SADC and the AU. Why anyone would want to participate in the 2028 elections without any meaningful reforms being implemented speaks volumes of the individual concerned. After 45 years of rigged elections, why anyone would still want to believe that they can allow Zanu PF to rig the elections and somehow plug vote rigging loopholes to stop the regime winning those rigged elections, beggars belief. But this is where we are as a nation. We've been participating in flawed elections because we don't even know what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections in this day and age. That is tragic. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.